October 2022, a woman I'll call Nancy sits at her kitchen table and opens her retirement statement. She's 63. She did everything the experts told her. As she got older, she moved money out of stocks and into bonds. The safe part, the seatbelt. This statement should be boring. Instead, the safe half of her savings is down 16%. There was no stock market crash that did this. Nothing she was ever warned about explains it. The thing that reached in and took her money was a market she had never once looked at, and by the time she understood what happened, it was already done. I'm going to show you exactly what hit Nancy, because the same machine is setting your mortgage rate right now, this second, and most people who own bonds have no idea it exists. By the end, you'll be able to look at one number and know what every move in this market costs you in dollars. And the strangest part, the signal that saw Nancy's disaster coming months in advance, is something you can check yourself in about 5 seconds. Hold on to that. I'll be honest with you. For most of my life, the word bond made my eyes glaze over. It sounded like the most boring corner of finance, the thing you're supposed to own and never think about. That instinct, treating this as boring, is the exact trap Nancy walked into. So here's my promise. Give me the next few minutes and you'll never see it as boring again, because you'll finally see the bill it's been quietly mailing you. A bond is just a loan. A government, a company, a city needs money, and instead of a bank, they borrow it from investors. You hand over a fixed amount, the principal. In return, you get two things: a fixed payment every year, the coupon, and your principal back on a set date, maturity. That's the whole product. It isn't the bond that's dangerous, it's the scale. Nobody borrows like the U.S. government. The Treasury puts the national debt above $39 trillion. Forget the total, look only at the interest. About $1.1 trillion a year, roughly $2.9 billion a day, weekends included, more than the country spends on its entire military. Every dollar of that is priced by the exact same market that just gutted Nancy's bonds and quietly set your mortgage. And this market runs on one rule, just one. When interest rates go up, the price of bonds that already exist goes down. Rates down, prices up. Opposite directions every single time. Keep that rule in your hand, because it explains both Nancy's statement and the number on your loan. But first, you need to see it small. Buy a $1,000 bond paying 3%. It pays you $30 a year. Weeks later, the Treasury issues new bonds at 5%, paying $50 on the same $1,000. Now try to sell yours. Nobody pays full price for $30 a year when $50 is sitting on the shelf. Before that $30 looks competitive. You didn't lose a single payment, but on paper, your $1,000 is now worth $600. Hold that picture. Nancy's entire disaster is that multiplied. Here's the part that should make you angry. Out of a $140 trillion bond market, one bond quietly runs your life. The 10-year U.S. Treasury, yielding about 4.6% this week. When a bank sets your mortgage, it doesn't invent the rate. It looks at the 10-year and asks, why lend to a family for 30 years when I can lend to the government risk-free at 4.6%? It wouldn't unless you pay more, so it adds about 2 points. That is how you get Freddie Mac's 6.49% average today. Meet Dave buying a house on a $450,000 30-year loan. At 6.49%, he pays $2,841 a month. Now the 10-year rise is half a point, something the bond market can do in one quiet week. Dave's rate jumps to 6.99%, his payment to $2,991. That's $150 more a month for 360 months, about $53,800 over the loan. A full point, still routine, pushes him to 7.49%, and that single move costs him roughly $108,700. Dave never bought that bond. He never opened that market. It billed him anyway. Want the real size of it? Run Dave's exact loan through two real dates. January 2021, Freddie Mac's all-time low, 2.65%. His payment would be $1,813 a month. October 2023, the peak, 7.79%. The identical loan costs $3,236. Same house, same buyer, same paperwork. The only thing that changed was one bond yield, and the gap is $1,423 a month, about $512,000 over 30 years. A $500,000 bill, no invoice, no signature. So far, the bond market looks like it only takes, but For 50 years, it did the opposite for savers, and this is where Nancy comes back. The deal was simple: 60% stocks to grow your money, 40% bonds to protect it, the famous 60-40. When stocks fell, bonds usually rose and caught you. The seatbelt. Then 2022 broke the one rule that made it work. To kill inflation, the Federal Reserve hiked rates faster than in 40 years, from near zero to over 4% in a single year. Apply our rule: rates up, bonds down. The Bloomberg U.S. aggregate, the entire bond market, fell about 13%, its worst year on record. The S&P 500 fell around 18% at the same time, so the safe 60-40 dropped about 16%. The seatbelt didn't catch anyone because it was bolted to the same crash. That is Nancy's statement. And the further out the maturity, the worse it got. Long treasuries, the safest assets on earth, lost close to a third of their value. But here's what stung most. Two retirees, same year, same safe bond fund label. One lost 6%, the other lost 30%. The difference was a single number sitting on both their fact sheets, in a spot almost nobody reads. Not the risk score, not the rating. One number called duration. Duration estimates how much a fund drops for each 1-point rise in rates. Nancy had $600,000 in what she thought was safe. Duration 6, typical for a broad index fund, means a 1-point rise costs her $36,000. But she was actually in a long-dated Treasury fund, duration 16, so the same move cost her $96,000. Same $600,000, same day. A $60,000 gap decided entirely by a number she was never told to check. And there's a cruel twist. If Nancy had owned a single bond and held it to maturity, those price swings would have meant nothing. She'd collect every coupon and get her principal back. But a fund never matures. It's a basket repriced every single day, so the loss printed on her statement, and it stayed there. Now, why do bonds usually protect you? And why did that fail? Two forces. First, safety has a price. The government can print the dollars it owes, companies can't, so companies pay a higher yield. And that gap, the high yield spread, widens before a recession like a fever before the symptoms. Second, when fear hits, a war, a bank failure, a downgrade, investors flee stocks and sprint into treasuries within hours. The flight to quality, which pushes bond prices up exactly as stocks fall. That opposite dance protected savers for 50 years. 2022 broke it because the fire itself was rising rates, and rising rates burned stocks and bonds together. The hedge failed because the danger and the shield had become the same thing. That same tug of war even prices the stock market. Stocks have to beat the risk-free 4.6% on a 10-year by enough to be worth the risk, and that extra reward is the equity risk premium. When yields rise, the reward shrinks and money drains back into bonds. The entire 2010s boom ran on yields so low that almost any stock looked worth buying. 2022 was that engine slammed into reverse. Remember the signal I told you to hold, the one that saw Nancy's crash coming. This is it, the yield curve. Line up Treasury yields by maturity. 3-month at 3.7%, 2-year at 4.2%, 10-year at 4.6%, 30-year at 5.1%. Normally it slopes up. Longer money, higher pay. And right now it's calm and normal, but sometimes it inverts. Short-term yields climb above long-term, and the 2-year pays more than the 10-year. When that happens, the bond market is screaming that the Fed will be forced to cut rates because a slowdown is coming. Research from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco found that essentially every U.S. recession over the past several decades was preceded by that inversion. No other single signal is that clean, and it's public, free, and takes 5 seconds to check. So what do you actually do with all this? 3 moves. 1, your cash. The FDIC says the average savings account pays 0.38%, the rate hiding at most big-name banks. A 3-month Treasury bill pays about 3.7%, and top high-yield savings around 4.2%, all of them just as safe. Dave keeps $40,000 in a normal account, earning $152 a year. The same $40,000 in T-bills earns $1,480, almost 10 times more on identical risk. And over 5 years, the bank quietly costs him about $6,640. 2, your bonds. Find the duration on your fund's fact sheet. Above 7, it moves hard when rates do. Above 15, it's a volatile stock wearing a safe costume. 3, if inflation scares you. Treasury I bonds pay a composite 4.26% through October 2026 and adjust with inflation, capped at $10,000 a year on Treasury Direct, the most direct hedge a normal saver can buy. Nancy didn't lose that money because she was reckless. She lost it because she was handed one word, safe, and stopped asking questions. You won't make that mistake now. The 10-year Treasury takes 5 seconds to look up. When it climbs, your mortgage and your car loan climb with it. When it drops fast, the economy is bracing for a hit. It's the check engine light for your entire financial life, and you can finally read it. The people who understand this market aren't smarter than you. They just refuse to believe it was boring. If this made one invisible thing visible for you, hit like. It genuinely pushes this video to people who were told this stuff was over their heads. And subscribe, because we run this exact math on your money every week, and I want you in the room for the next one.